How's it going, everybody? Football Rob here. I am breaking down the Minnesota Timberwolves and their latest game. They were at home tonight. They lost to the Charlotte Hornets 115 to 108. Charlotte, very good team. They improve to 7-3. Minnesota drops to 3-7. And another disappointing loss for these guys. I'm seeing a pattern develop, and it's not a good one with them. They start off strong. They have an exciting, competitive first quarter. They take control of the game in the second quarter, and then they completely fall apart in the third quarter. And this is coming off a win. They defeated the Los Angeles Lakers, and Andrew Wiggins had a career high, an NBA career high, 47 points. And this is how they follow it up, with a whimper like this. Before I get into the game notes, these are some of the things that I've noticed, watching the Wolves for the last few weeks. Well, in this game particularly, I'd have to say Ricky Rubio. I haven't watched him consistently enough to comment exactly on his defensive abilities. This is my first time watching him this season. In this game, he was a complete turnstile on defense. Every single Kemba Walker highlight started with him blowing past Ricky Rubio. And whatever he got whatever shot he wanted. He set up his teammates. And he just dominated the action outside, inside, whatever angle he wanted. And that's just not good enough. 5 steals he had, 30 points. He had rebounds, he had assists, 6 assists. And Ricky Rubio, my eyes on him. I'm really gonna look to see, is he really this bad defensively? Because I know that Kemba Walker scores 25.3 points a game. He's one of the most exciting point guards in the NBA. I know Ricky Rubio's coming off an injury, so I'm not going to completely rip him a new one in this video, but I'm definitely going to be watching to see, is Ricky Rubio a defensive liability for the extended period of this season? The next thing I noticed in this game, Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's a phenomenal young talent. Just celebrated his 21st birthday today by jacking up 10 threes in this contest. Now, I think he's a capable three-point shooter, but to be shooting 10 threes a game, I think he's getting a little carried away. And I particularly noticed in the third quarter when Charlotte was making a run, he was pressing. The great John Wooden said, "Be quick, but don't hurry." And it seemed like Cat was hurrying, rushing, trying to erase that deficit with one shot. There's no, 10-point, 3-point. There's no 10-point shot. You can't come back all the way with one shot, and Cat has to know that. And he was making, defensive mistakes in that sequence as well. So, and not just him, it was the whole team. But I noticed particularly he was getting frustrated, and it led to a lot of poor shot selection, defensive mistakes, turnovers, and things like that. And then the third thing I'd say is that, Minnesota doesn't have a bench. We know that. And it showed up because, Charlotte has a bench. And Bellinelli played well for them, 12 points off the pine. And Frank Kaminsky toasted them in the fourth quarter, 20 points. It was like March Madness all over again at Wisconsin for him. He was doing whatever he wanted to do. He got a 3-point play at one point where he posted up Ricky Rubio. He was hitting shots from downtown. He was hitting shots in the lane. He was really just controlling the offensive flow for Charlotte, along with some other players. Zeller had 14 points and 9 boards, so a lot of good role players for Charlotte that I don't think Minnesota can match up with. They have great young talent, Levine, Wiggins, Cat, but the role players are very weak for Minnesota, and that's, I think, what led to this loss. So, in the first quarter, as I said, there were 5 ties, 10 lead changes. Kemba Walker hit a buzzer beater after the first quarter. It was 31-30 Charlotte. But then, Minnesota just controlled the glass. They were turning the ball over a lot in the first half. They kind of got that under control in the second half, but it was still a lot. I look at my notes here. What was it? 28 rebounds in the first half for Minnesota, 14 rebounds for Charlotte. So they're competing, they're hustling, they're doing the things they need to do, effort-wise, but it's just the execution. It kind of gets away from them at times. So then at the half, Charlotte, they fell behind. They fell behind, and it was, 48? No, it was 58-46 at halftime. I have trouble reading my chicken scratch sometimes. You have to forgive me. 58-46. Minnesota had the lead at halftime, and then in the third quarter, that's when the problems started, because net rating in the third quarter, Minnesota is worst in the league. They're minus 33.1. And Charlotte is first in the league, plus 33.1. So, one strong team that's number 1 in the league in the third quarter versus the worst, the absolute worst, dead last, Minnesota in the third quarter. So you knew that was going to be a problem. And in the third quarter, it was really a game of runs. It was a 15-2 run by Charlotte. Minnesota then had a 9-0 run, then Charlotte had an 8-0 run, and then Charlotte had another 19-4 run. After all these runs, after it was all said and done, like I said, it was minus 19 for Minnesota after 3 quarters. So they just completely evaporated after a really good first half. All that hard work that they put into the first half completely gone. But in the fourth quarter, they showed some life. Wiggins really came through. Levine also did. They eventually tied the game at one point. It was 95-all. And Wiggins at one point had 10 points in the fourth quarter. This was his 8th 20-point game of the season, so he's really, I think, a guy they can lean on when they get into dire straits. But the execution, it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And there was also a point in the game. It was 2 minutes remaining, and Minnesota was down 3. They had 2 opportunities from downtown. Levine and Karl Anthony Towns they both missed threes, and they both misses hit the back iron. And it's like this team is like a so close kind of a coulda, woulda, shoulda team, and if either one of those shots go down, it's a completely different ball game. But then because they fell apart and they were falling behind late in the game, they start gambling on defense. Zellner had an easy dunk in there, and Kaminsky had an alley-oop dunk. There was no rotation, and this was all within a minute or under a minute to go, and that kind of sealed the deal. And 18 turnovers by Minnesota. That's just not going to cut it. They got to cut out these mistakes, and playing smarter. They just have to play smarter, and they have to be focused for 48 minutes. Because if they're not, then they're going to continue to just come a little bit short each and every game. So next game they have at home, they'll be facing the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm happy to say I'll be hanging out with my good buddy Gio at the game. This will be my first Timberwolves home game, and I'm excited to be heading down to the cities, checking it out, and I'll have a report after that game for you as well. That's all I got for right now. It's Football Rob signing off.